If you're really hard on yourself when you look in the mirror, you're more likely to be hard on other people.
One of our major goals is we want to represent God through our marriage.
Explain your heart behind it. Like, I really enjoy being around you and it brings me so much joy and happiness.
I feel like there's so much emphasis, depending on what circles you surround yourself in, on getting married, and like that's the pinnacle of like success. I would say to somebody that's single, like, enjoy your singleness. It's okay to be single. It's okay to have that space, have that time, because that's when you get to, and you continue to do it when you're married, but get to work on yourself and figure out like who you are. So I would say the best way to do it and to detach from the outcome of getting married is just becoming the best version of yourself.
I remember I kept being like, this feels like it's as good as it's gonna get, so I don't really wanna walk away. And I've already invested so much time. And I had these thoughts of like, I couldn't see myself without him. And one more that kind of goes into this is I remember I had roommates, and sometimes I'd come home from dates and they'd be like, how was the date? And I'd be like, it was good. And I said this to you the other day, but whenever your voice goes up really high like that and you say, it was good, it means it wasn't that freaking good, because your voice wouldn't have gone up. I'm like, it was good.
We're biased towards ourselves, but if you look in the mirror and really take inventory and have that list of, would this person be attracted to me, then you can go and work on those areas that might be gaps. I think it's about getting honest with yourself, because it's not always black and white.
It's not black and white, no.
That's I guess the challenge of dating in general. It's like, well, if I just do these things, then it will work out. Well, it's like, it always doesn't.
It's better to spend less years with the right person than more years with the wrong person.
I think everybody out there is going to find happiness in a different way. In society right now, with a lot of quote unquote experts that seem to think that they have the answer for everyone.
Accountability means I'm willing to admit that I played a role.
Pain, but not just pain, because I think we can turn into martyrs and we can be in pain and suffering and look how much I can carry. We talked earlier about like terminally unique, like look how hard my situation is.
Your heart kind of tells you the truth all the time, even when it hurts.
In order for you to get all the gifts at the end of the rainbow, you have to be responsible for your own energy.
My purpose is to bring change and confidence and leadership to the world, right? So when people see that somebody like me can achieve, it gives them hope.
It is interesting when we release our ego and make it less about us and make it more about the people who actually need our message.
I do it now. I'm not waiting to be a billionaire to help financially people.
You guys are going to absolutely love today's episode, but before we dive in, I wanted to let you guys know about the 2023 Evolve Retreats. I'm hosting 3 retreats this year in some of the most beautiful places on earth. The first one is in Oahu, Hawaii in July, and the next 2 are both in Iceland, both in September. This retreat is for men, women, solo travelers, couples. Everyone is welcome. Anyone that is interested in soul nourishment, adventure, exploring the beautiful wonders of earth, personal growth and development, connection, making new memories with new friends, and anyone that is on their own path of evolving. We are now accepting signups, so head on over to evolvedemilyretreats.com and hopefully I will see you later this year in either Hawaii or Iceland. Now let's get to today's episode.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the Evolve with Emily show. I am your host, Emily Hayden. And before we dive into today's episode, if you guys have not yet grabbed your retreat tickets to either Hawaii or Iceland, the Evolve with Emily community is going to Hawaii in July and Iceland in September. There's actually 2 retreats going to Iceland in September, and I could not be more excited to create this space for you guys to come, adventure, explore, and connect with each other, with yourselves, with God in a way that you never have before. So if you're interested in checking out the retreat details, make sure to check the link down below, and I hope to see you guys at one of those. Make sure to DM me if you have any questions. I would love to answer your questions just at Emily Hayden on Instagram. And let's go ahead and dive into today's topic. So recently we have talked about love and relationships, and we've shared some really hard and vulnerable moments and stories and experiences to hopefully help other people learn how to recognize unhealthy relationships, toxic behavior, abusive behavior even, and just offered our advice for navigating those waters. But today I thought it would be really beautiful and life-giving to talk about healthy love in relationships. So I've actually asked a previous podcast guest, who was episode 322 on embodying true and authentic confidence. Her name is Janelle. I've asked her to be back on the the show with an extra special guest, her husband, Frankie. So Janelle and Frankie, welcome to the Evolve Family Show.
Thank you so much for having us. So pumped to be back.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, of course. So everyone loved your episode. Your episode blew up naturally without even a lot of promotion, which I thought was really cool. I'm not sure if people took the extra step to like really reach out to you, but for the listeners that did listen to it, if you didn't reach out to her, shoot her a DM and just let her know how that podcast impacted her. But for those that did, I know that they're here and they're excited to hear more about your love story, because as I mentioned on the last part of the podcast, I'm still so salty about it. At the end of her book, she's a best-selling author. You guys know that from the last episode. At the end of your book, you talk about Frankie and this magical love, and then you don't share the story.
That's like her favorite thing to do, is talk about our love story. You didn't share that?
I know. Like, I didn't get into the details, and I'm sitting there hanging by a thread. I'm in tears. I'm finishing the book, and I'm like literally just hanging. Yeah. I'm like, this girl, my girlfriend, just left me hanging.
Right. How dare you?
How dare you?
She knows how to draw people in.
Yes.
Cliffhanger.
Yes. So I'm sitting here and I want all the details to this love story. But before we dive in a little bit, they've met you, they've listened to a whole episode on you. Frankie, could you give us just a little bio, maybe like the 2-3 minute version or less, whatever, of just a little bit about you, your life? And I would actually also like to hear from the both of you what your influences of love and relationship were growing up. So what was the nature of the relationships that you saw and that you were exposed to? Were they together? Were they divorced? Do you have long lasting relationships in your life and experience? What does that look like? So I know I just gave you a lot, but Frankie, the mic is yours. Tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah. So thanks again for having us. I grew up watching my parents. They've been married for, I should know the exact number, but over 30 years, I think. Wow. At this point. Very loyal to each other, very loyal to the kids, very loyal to me and my two siblings. I'm the oldest. So I grew up in a family where surrounded by loyalty, surrounded by a tight family unit, and a lot of cousins, a lot of other family members around that have all stayed together for the most part. So that's kind of the family I grew up in. East Coast Catholic family. So like a lot of traditions, a lot of celebrations together as a large family unit. So family and loyalty and friendships and close relationships has always been very important to me. And it's how I grew up, and then, made my way to Colorado after that. And then now in California, which, so awesome. I can go into more details, but that's for the focus today, I think.
Yeah. Okay. And tell me just a little bit about what you do, and also shout out your podcast. You have a podcast, right?
I love it. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm in sales. So I'm an enterprise software seller for a company called People AI. And we do, me and my coworker Griffin have a podcast called the Elite Selling Podcast so we help salespeople with their mindset with large enterprise deals. So if you're a software seller, check it out.
I think everyone is in the sales division at a certain point, right? Even if you're not selling like a software or something like that, if you're selling a fitness coaching service or some sort of anything really, like you're either selling yourself, you're selling a product, you're selling a mindset, you're selling a lifestyle. So I think learning about the mindset of selling can be really beneficial, even if that's not like your direct job. So we'll link his podcast down below for anyone that wants to check out that.
Thank you.
So yeah, Janelle, tell us a little bit about the examples of love and relationship that you did or didn't have in your life growing up.
Yeah. And I also want to say really quickly that the Next Level Confident podcast is about to come back after a 2-year break.
Okay.
And guess who my co-host is?
Any guesses, guys? I cannot figure it out.
The Frankie Vignone.
Hello. I'm on 2 podcasts now.
Yeah. So it's fun. We've actually gotten to practice a little bit before today via the episodes we've recorded so far.
So you already have episodes recorded for it?
Yep. They just haven't been launched yet.
Do we have a launch date?
I don't like picking specific dates for things. I'm really like, let's see.
We'll talk later, and I'll have you give me a date later.
Okay. I don't struggle with taking action. So it's more like growth for me to try to be like, it's okay if you don't have it all controlled, because I'm a very like get stuff done, take massive action, overworker. So I'm like working on being like doing less. For me, it's growth to be like, I don't have a date, and it will be in the next few weeks, but I don't know exactly when, and that's okay.
I love that. Thank you for mentioning that.
Yeah.
I think it's important.
Okay, so going into relationships, in some similar ways to Frankie, I was raised in a home where my parents are still together, really strong Christians. I have 3 brothers, so family was also a really big part of our family. Maybe not as much like extended family as Frankie because we were spread out so much. So we saw our extended family like once a year or something like that. But yeah, I would say that like my parents growing up, they gave a lot to us kids, which was really amazing. And I think both came from families where the marriages weren't as healthy. Like my dad, his parents were divorced at a really young age. And then my mom's parents, they were together till the day that my grandma passed away a couple years ago. Rest her soul. But they were in a very like traditional type marriage, I think, from like the olden days. And so there was just a lot of, I think, things in there that probably weren't the best for my mom to see growing up. And she was a therapist for 10 years. So she like, I think has talked fairly openly about some of that kind of stuff. But all that goes to say, I think when they got married, they were like, we want to make sure we're the best parents we can possibly be. And so I will say like in my formative years, they poured a lot into us kids, but I didn't see them pouring like a lot into their marriage. And I think it's a lot of families have this. It's like, I think it can be so easy you have your whole career, you have career stuff going on. And sometimes both have a career thing going on. Sometimes only, one person does and the other person's a stay-at-home parent. But it can be really easy to like pour into the career, pour into kids, and then to let the marriage fall on the back burner a bit. And so I did experience that with my parents growing up when I was younger. And I remember it being really hard for me. Like I remember, feeling like, gosh, like I feel like I don't see my parents looking at each other with like a lot of love. I felt like they were really good together in the way of like, they ran a really amazing households. And I watched them like host a lot of awesome events and like love on people. And my dad was actually kind of like a pastor. So like he was a pastor for college students. So like we had a lot of college students over and there was like a lot of ministry work happening. And my mom was pouring into a lot of the college gals and my dad was pouring into a lot of the college guys. And so like, it was really cool to see their ministry. But yeah, in those younger years, really, I didn't see a super happy marriage between them. It was strong. I guess I want to say that it was a strong marriage and they were very committed to each other. And like they, it's not like they never would say anything about divorce, like divorce wasn't an option, things like that. So they're very committed and very loyal. But for me as a child, I didn't see a whole lot of like fun and joy. But it's cool because now their marriage has gotten like so much better. And
really?
Yeah, now they go to like marriage seminars together. They've done like marriage, like, conferences. And I think my mom going back to school, she went back to school to become a therapist when I was, I think like either late high school or early college was when she went back. Yeah.
That's late.
Yeah. So yeah, super cool. Like she's reinvented herself numerous times because then she was a therapist and had her own practice for 10 years. And then she recently closed the doors on that and became a realtor. And now, because my dad builds houses now, so now she like sells all his houses and she sells all these other houses. And so she's like honestly crushing the real estate game. But so shout out mom
I love this
for crushing it. Like,
by the way, so proud.
I know, so proud. Yeah, it's so impressive. Like I love watching a woman, and a man, but I just love watching people reinvent themselves even like later on in life, like in their 40s.
And she's good
I'm doing
at
this.
it too.
50s, I'm doing this. Yeah, so it's never too late to reinvent yourself.
I love that so much. It's so inspiring because I think a lot of people have that limiting belief that they missed the window for opportunity when the reality is if you woke up today, that is your window of opportunity.
Yeah.
So, okay. I know on the last podcast you shared in your book as well that you were in a longer term relationship previously. And I'm curious how your upbringing with your parents and witnessing a relationship that maybe didn't feel so lively. How did that impact how you believed or thought, or maybe limiting beliefs that you may have had in that relationship?
I think that because of my parents, again, like earlier years, I think I just thought like relationships weren't really meant to be super happy. They were more like meant to be functional. And so I think I like with my 6-year boyfriend, we started dating when I was 16, by the way.
Wow.
So we were really young.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And so at first, my parents were really, it was awesome because they taught me at a really young age. They were like, hey, if you're going to date someone, like you should be thinking about marriage when you date them. Like you don't want to just date to date. And so I think that was a really cool thing that they taught me at a really young age. So I wasn't allowed to date till I was 16. And obviously I was like sneaking out with boys and dating
of course
before 16. Sorry, mom and dad.
They know now.
Spoiler alert.
They know now. Yeah. Spoiler alert. But then like when I did start dating this guy at 16, I remember like, you know, in my mind, I'm like, well, yeah, I could see myself marrying him, but like, it's so hard to envision whether you could really marry someone at 16 or not.
Totally.
And so like the years are going on and like, it was good, you know, and then like time kept going more and more. And so we dated all through college. We had one breakup for like 3 months, but otherwise we were together like all 6 of the years. And I remember like, I kept being like, this feels like it's as good as it's going to get. So I don't really want to walk away. And I've already invested so much time. And I had these thoughts of like, I couldn't see myself without him, but I also really couldn't picture myself with him. Like anytime I would picture him getting down on a knee and proposing or something, I would start to like feel anxiety and I would feel my body like feel like reject, like no. And so I remember even like, cause basically it was like towards the end of college and I lived in a small town in Fort Collins, Colorado, which actually one of your listeners did reach out to me after the last episode. And she says she lives in Fort Collins, Colorado. And she thought it was so crazy that I was from Fort Collins. So anyway, how cool. Shout out to you, girlfriend. In that town, like I feel like everyone kind of gets married pretty young. So a lot of my friends were actually getting engaged at like 21, 22. Totally. So here my friends are getting engaged and they had been with guys like way shorter amounts of time than I had been. And yet I had been with my guy for coming up on 6 years. And like every time I pictured the ring situation.
Kicking the can down the road.
Yeah. I was like, let's just keep like, I'm like, maybe a few more years, maybe if like, and so people would sometimes be like, they would get engaged and then people like, Janelle, don't worry, you're next. And I'd be like, no, it's cool. It's fine. Like no rush. It's all, you know? And so there was that feeling of like, no rush. Like we don't need to rush anything. So it was kind of like, I feel like that's like a sign if you're kind of always like, no rush. Like I don't need to get a ring on my finger. No rush. I don't really like, you know, that's like, you're putting the brake pedal on. Why, you know?
You said something really interesting in that explanation is you invested all this time and it was almost like you felt like, oh, I invested in spent and have memories with this person and I can't leave them now because we've got, you know, they know my family, I know their family. You've been on these momentous trips together probably at that point, especially after 6 years and especially at 16 years old. So like that's like that's a good portion of your life at 6 years. So I feel like a big challenge people have is like when they spend, you know, over a year plus with their significant other, then you feel like, oh, I can't get out of it because I've already invested all this time. And you mentioned that, but I think that's a really good point to double down on.
Yeah, I think that's something a lot of people struggle with. And I think it's really hard to leave something that is good, right? Especially when it's not toxic, especially when it's not unhealthy, so to speak. But I actually put out a little question box before this episode and I asked people to give us some thoughts or some questions. And it was actually on this topic where they're saying like, what if you're with somebody and you just have this like inner deeper knowing or belief, or maybe it's just a faith at this point that like there's something greater meant for you. Like, what do you guys think about that?
Got to move on. You have to. And this is coming from somebody that like, to dive more into my story. Like I have chronically have had girlfriends ever since like the 5th grade where it's like literally, I remember the first,
you would
like legitimately, I remember like talking to my dad and be like, all right, Dad, I think there's this girl that I want to ask out. Her name's Kendall.
Stop it.
Yeah. I'm like, walk me through what to do. And I was like, I'm going to do it on Valentine's Day.
Oh my gosh.
So I like went to Walmart with my dad and like bought chocolates and bought like a rose or something. And like I was like a school safety guard, like you could volunteer and do that. So I was like sitting out front, like let her in and like gave her the flowers and the rose, and I'm like, will you be my girlfriend?
Did she say yes?
Yeah, she said yes.
Of course. Have you met my husband? Look at how handsome he is.
But then it was like after that, it's like girlfriend after girlfriend after girlfriend.
Okay.
So I don't know where I was going with that, except to say like
walking away from good.
Yeah. So I'd always ask my dad whenever I was dating somebody and I had that feeling, I'd be like, can you change their personality? And he's legitimately.
You did? You asked that question?
Yeah, I did. I don't know. Is that bad?
We're not judging you. We're here to hold safe space.
Yes.
It's just interesting and very intriguing.
Yeah. And he'd be like, no, you can't, obviously.
Yeah.
But I think I say that because when you're so invested in somebody, you have like these crazy irrational thoughts of like, it can get better. But all of your friends and family around you see like you're going down this path that like it might not be a terrible toxic thing, but it's like not what God or the higher power has for you. Like there's more out there for you and other people around you can see it. And if you keep getting those signs from your closest friends and parents and whoever you look up to, like you should probably listen to that. because when you're in the middle of something, you have those emotional ties. It's hard. That's why I was asking dumb questions like, can you change their personality? So, yeah.
My dad gave me really good advice one time. He said, when you're with somebody and you're thinking about marrying them and thinking about this lifelong commitment, really ask yourself this question. Would you be with them if they changed absolutely nothing today?
It's a great question.
Like if nothing else ever changed, would you still be with them?
Yeah.
And I think that's a really good guiding questions. Do you guys have any good guiding questions or thoughts or maybe a piece of advice that a mentor, maybe a parent or someone gave you that really helped you with some critical decisions when it came to love and relationships?
Yeah, for me, the first one that comes to mind, the quote that I always kept coming back to is, it's better to spend less years with the right person than more years with the wrong person.
My mind is blown. That's amazing.
Yeah. And I really held on to that because when all my other friends were getting engaged and married, I was like, always the bridesmaid, never the bride. And I was like the maid of honor like twice in one summer and all these things. It felt so like lonely. And when I was with this 6-year boyfriend, it was confusing because I'm like, should I want this? Like I want to want it, but I don't really want it, but I should want it, you know, and I do love him and I can't picture my life without him, but I also can't picture my life in 20 or 30 years with him. And if, you know, if you listen to the other episode, you'll also understand a little bit more like some of the lies and limiting beliefs behind like my own worth and my own life that were behind that. But I just remember like when I heard that, I was like, okay, yeah, I could marry him now and would have more years together or something. And I can keep up with the Joneses and like be married when everyone else is getting married. Or I could wait. And I'm like, even if I don't get married till I'm like 40 or something, which I mean, that's not really that old either, but it might be older in comparison to when some other people get married. I still am going to live till 80 or 90. So I'm like, that's still 40 or 50 years in an incredible relationship. So I would always tell myself that I'm like, I could get married to him and we'd have like 60 years together. But what is 60 years in a relationship that you're like not really that happy in, you know?
No kidding. I have to share a limiting belief that I had and how I came over it. I had this limiting belief that the person that I really desire is out there. And then I really just reality checked myself and I was like, just as much as I am real, he is real.
Yeah.
Right. Like I can't think that I'm so special that like there's no one out there, you know, like it's maybe a little egotistical to think that like there wouldn't be a perfect match out there for you.
Yeah.
And one of my friends, she shared how her limiting belief, and I called her out on this, but it's kind of funny to bring it up. Her limiting belief was like, she was like, yeah, I know that he exists. I know that he's out there, but it's going to take 1,000,000 years to meet him. She literally said 1,000,000 with so much confidence. Wow. And I was like, listen to yourself.
Cancel.
Canceling that out right now.
Right.
So, but how does it feel? Like both of you, let's talk into the moment where you're single, you're desiring a relationship. And I think a lot of people go through this single phase where they're desiring to have this loving relationship and they don't have it yet. And it gets really difficult to be in that loneliness, in that lack of the desire coming to fruition. So like, how do you navigate that and not give into temporary satisfactions? How did you navigate that season? And then from there, we'll go into y'all's meeting and things.
Yeah, I would say,
well, you weren't single ever, remember?
I was single for a little bit.
How long were you single?
I went the longest time I was single.
From 5th grade.
Probably a year max.
Okay. Then that was 4th grade?
Stop. That was good.
From 0 to however old you are in 5th grade was my longest streak.
Okay. So we get it. Like you were a relationship guy.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I was going to say, I feel like there's so much emphasis. I mean, depending on what circles you surround yourself in, on getting married, and like that's the pinnacle of like success. And I would say to somebody that's single, like enjoy your singleness. It's okay to be single. It's okay to have that space, have that time, because that's when you get to, and you continue to do it when you're married, but can get to work on yourself and figure out like who you are. So I would say the best way to do it and to detach from the outcome of getting married is just becoming the best version of yourself. And that's like anything. Like if you're listening to this podcast, you're into personal development. So the same way as you would apply to become the best version of yourself in business, do that same thing for your relationships and for marriage. So the way that Janelle and I have talked about it is think about what does that other person have that you want to be married to or dating? Like what qualities do they have? And then kind of reverse engineer it and say, who do I need to become for that person to be attracted to me? So if I'm like, if I've got my future wife as, I don't know, name some crazy characteristics and traits, like
she doesn't party a bunch. She's not a super flirty person with all these guys. Like she's very loyal.
She's successful. She's got her head on straight. She goes to church every Sunday. She works out, 6 days a week. She has a great body. Like everything, get detailed into it. And then if you look at your own life and you're like, if I rolled up, like, am I that type of person that person would be attracted to? And I don't think we're honest enough with ourselves, because we're biased towards ourselves. But if you look in the mirror and really take inventory and have that list of, would this person be attracted to me? Then you can go and work on those areas that might be gaps. I think it's about getting honest with yourself.
Yeah, like we both had lists before we met each other of like over 20 things that we were looking for in our significant other. So I really believe in the power of specificity and knowing exactly what you're looking for. And then the same thing goes is making a list of all the things you have to offer your future spouse. And that list should also be about 20 things long, because if you're, I think it go one of both ways. I mean, sometimes people have really long lists and then like they're not being self-aware and they need to grow. That was actually me for a long time. Like I was, when I was in that 6-year relationship, I was like, I'd want to be with a guy who was like, blah, 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 blah. And then I was thinking about me and I'm like, just the things I just said, like I was out partying. I was out being a super flirty person. Like I wasn't being the most loyal girlfriend. I wasn't cheating, but I was definitely being flirty. Like I was definitely, eyes were open and looking around even while having a boyfriend. Like, are those the qualities of the man that I'm looking to marry? Does he have his eyes open? Is he looking and checking out other girls while he has a girlfriend? Is he out getting drunk on a Friday and a Saturday and then rolling into church hungover? Like, is that really who I'm looking to marry? No. Then look at my own life. And if that's who I am, then there's something that needs to change in me in order to attract a man of that caliber. And so I think that's one person. Sometimes, and a lot of women I work with have really low self-confidence. So they actually don't see anything they have to offer. And that's why they date total, douchebags is because they see themselves as like such like low value. So they date guys who cheat on them, and they date guys who are really toxic, and they date guys who don't even,
because they think that's what they deserve.
They think that's what they deserve. Like I had one client who was like, my boyfriend didn't even like being seen with me in public. And then like with us working together, she like left him and changed a lot in herself and became the woman, and then attracted an incredible man who she's now deeply in love with, and they're, looking at rings together. And so it's really cool, but you gotta first actually realize like who you are and your own strengths. And so I think that's why it's so beautiful to make that list, not only of what you're looking for, but make the list of yourself. And if you're more on the confident side and you're a little bit more like, I'm amazing, then you need to probably be like, check yourself and be like, no, really, what growth do you need? And then if you're more on the insecure side and you naturally pick yourself apart and naturally really hard on yourself, then you need to think, okay, what are the ways I can love myself and be kinder to myself? Because the more I'm loving and kind to myself, the more I'm going to attract someone who is going to be loving and kind to me.
Oh my gosh, so much gold. That was go awesome. Off, like just so much truth. I think that's really important to mention, that you attract what you are.
Yes.
Right. And starting to look at some of your relational patterns. Sometimes it's really difficult to look at your relational patterns and say, oh, there actually is a pattern here. Why am I experiencing these things? And it's not to take it and to shame yourself, but it's just to educate and empower yourself to make some really positive changes. And if you're recognizing that you are in these toxic or unhealthy relationships, there may be an issue of worth. There may be some underlying unconscious issues that are driving your entire human experience. So when you take the time to work on yourself, like you guys are saying, and you take the time to take ownership of who it is that you would like to be for your partner, you really do start to become those things. And when you truly know your worth from the inside out, you will not tolerate anything that does not match that. Like, and it won't be a mental struggle of like, oh, I shouldn't tolerate this. It's like from the inner depths of your being, that just doesn't fly with you.
Right.
And you'll respect yourself enough to leave situations before they ever get bad at the first sign of a red flag. So
and you won't even energetically attract them, period. Like you won't even see them in your life. Like it's so crazy.
That's so good
to notice. Like I've had friends or clients who are like, well, how do you not attract guys like this, and this? I'm like, I dated so many guys and none of them were like that ever. Like they were not even in my conscious, anywhere. They were nowhere in my reality because it wasn't in my my conscious. It wasn't in my reality.
I like that you say that. And I asked you guys at the beginning what your examples of love and relationship were growing up, because that really does play such a huge role into what people think love is. So sometimes you wonder why people accept less than good relationships, and often it's because that's what they were modeled when they were younger. And even though consciously they would say, oh, I'll never have a relationship like that, unconsciously they really believe that that's love, and they believe that that's what that looks like. So that's why it's interesting to just do work on yourself, you know, figure out what your past was, what your examples of love were, and see if there's any reframing, redefining that needs to happen. So I want to get into green flags. What are some green flags that you guys noticed about each other? You can go one and one, you can spit them off however you'd like, but what are some green flags?
I think the first thing that came to mind overall is that there's just unexplainable peace when you're with that person. Just like peace would be the tagline for it. And I feel like every other girl I dated before Janelle, it was always like, it's good, but this one thing. But I like wasn't looking with Janelle when I met her, but I couldn't find anything. And it's like just this unexplainable peace. So I'd say that was a green flag for me.
He was doing 1 year of no dating when he met me 3 months into that.
Wait, no way.
3 months. I lasted 3 months.
Says the dater from 5th grade.
Hey.
That's awesome.
Hey.
But it all worked out, you know, God's timing is perfect.
Hold on. Let's speak to that for a second, right? Because I can be on your level, right? Where you're like so structured and so like, this is the date, right? So if I were to commit to like a year, no dating,
right,
it would be kind of hard to like open up or break free from that. So like, how did she kind of get through that? How did she get through that wall? What was your navigation? Were you like, should I reject this? Should I not be a part of this? I said I was doing a year. Like, what were you navigating during that time? Do you remember?
That's such a good question. I mean, I was early on in like my getting back into faith with Christianity, and I had some like pastors and mentors like telling me like my becoming who I needed to be was like getting closer to God and getting closer to the man that God would want me to be. So like that was my focus, and that's the reason why the 1 year of no dating came into play in the first place. Like, I'm not as structured as Janelle. Like,
we balance each other out.
She's very like when she says she's going to do something, like she does it. I'm more like futuristic. It'll get done. Like, I'm very ambitious in different ways. So I don't have a good answer except for really like going back to just peace, unexplainable peace. And I feel like I'd love to hear both of your thoughts, because you both are more structured than I am. But like, I just knew that I knew if I just waited 1 more year, like she might be on, she would 100% be on to the next guy. Not in a bad way, but just because she's so like, look at her, she's amazing. Totally. She's incredible. Aww. And if I didn't break my rule, I might not be married to her. Wow. So I feel like it's good to have structure. It's good to have the list. It's good to have your rules, but also like, it's okay to break them. And I didn't do it alone. I wasn't like, oh, I'm going to marry this woman and that's that. Like, I sought out mentors and people that I respected that had good relationships, and like I ran what I was dealing with by them. Like, yeah, it checks out. So I would say, to answer your question, like, it was peace, and then I went and sought out advice from people that I respected with the marriages or relationships that I respected.
Yeah. That's what about you?
Yeah, green flags. So I remember in something, it's like Frankie kind of just said this, but I remember calling one of my best friends and talking about Frankie, and I was like, he's this and he's this and he's this and he's this. And she's like, okay, but, and I was like, no, there are no buts. And she's like, yeah, there are no buts. And I was like, no, there's no buts. And she's like, but there's always buts. Like, she's like, every time you've ever called about a guy ever, there has always been, he's really awesome, but there's this one problem, or there's this one thing missing, or but this, but that. And I was like, no. This time there's no buts. And she's like, whoa. So that was kind of like wild that we both had like no buts about each other. It just felt like total peace. And
the only but is that we were long distance.
Yeah, we were long distance. So that was story, like, that was tough. But even then it like taught us how to communicate. Yeah, we were like FaceTiming sometimes, especially like in the early stages for like 1 to 3 hours a night, like just so like obsessed with each other. And
which my bedtime is like 9:30, 10 p.m. I was staying up till like midnight for this girl.
Yeah, it was a real sacrifice for him. Now that I know him now, he turns into like a pumpkin at 9:45.
Don't talk to me after 9:30.
So the fact that I
turned
like
into a pumpkin,
the fact that I made it past the pumpkin stage for all those like weeks and months, I had no idea. Yeah. But then another green flag that comes to mind is, I had one and it actually just like totally left my brain.
It'll come back.
It'll come back.
I'm sure you have other green flags.
You have to have
I know. He's sitting here like, think harder, babe.
But I had a specific one. Like it was like in my thought pattern, and then we broke off and started talking about our thing. And then I was like trying to come back to it. And this is what I was gonna say. Yeah. It's that Frankie did a really good job of pursuing me where there was no games. And so like I didn't like after we had our first date, which we can I guess talk more about our story at some point if you want. But like he texted me immediately after he drove away, like within 10 minutes. And it was like, oh my gosh, I don't know how I'm going to think today. Like, this is crazy, like all this stuff. And I was like saying the same stuff back, but there wasn't like, like sometimes after a date, you think it went really well, but then you just don't hear for a little bit. And I think that sometimes maybe people are like playing games. So then there's been times like, I'm not against like texting first. So sometimes I'll text first and say something like that. But then maybe they're playing games or sometimes they're receptive, but I'm like, I don't know, just like energetically, there's not like a match of like how quickly like things are clicking. And to be honest, for me, honestly, it was usually the other direction. Usually things were clicking much quicker for them. And I was like,
yeah,
there were too many butts for you, That's so good.
Exceeding the 3 butt quota.
Right, exactly.
The 3 butt quota. No, we have a no butt quota here.
Yeah, no butt.
0 butt quota. But yeah, so I think that, that's always a really good sign is when you're both like, you're both moving at the same pace and there's no like confusion around how he feels about you or how you feel about him. And one more that kind of goes into this is I remember like I had roommates and sometimes I'd come home from dates and they'd be like, how was the date? And I'd be like, it was good. And I said this to you the other day, but whenever your voice goes up really high like that and you say, it was good, it means it wasn't that freaking good, because your voice wouldn't have gone up and like, it was good. You're trying to talk yourself into it. You're trying to be like, it was so good, but it wasn't that good. And so I remember like that obviously didn't feel like that. Like we left our dates and like we're like friggin' on fire for each other. Yeah. Just like so excited for the next date. That's another big green flag. Like if you're kind of like, if you ask me on another date, that'd be cool. I don't really care that much either way. Like that's not a green flag. That's like a red flag. A green flag is like, I can't wait to go on a second date with him. Like you should be excited. And that's the problem is we settle too often.
Yeah.
And then we're like, well, I don't think I should, I don't have to feel that excited for the next date. And we like kind of tell ourselves why we don't have to feel that excited, but it's so important to feel excited. Like the beginning stages of your relationship should be exciting.
Absolutely. And I love what you're mentioning here because what you're really saying is just to show up as your authentic self. So if you go on a date and you enjoy it, say it, speak it, like really show up as you. We literally have people online telling other men and women how to play these games and to like wait to text them. And this is like their relationship advice. And it blows my mind. Yeah. Because then you create a whole community and culture of people that are not being authentic with themselves, with each other. And then we wonder why we all feel more disconnected than ever. There's a question that came in that I want to ask you guys before we dive into your story, because it kind of relates to all of this. And it's a female. So I'd love both of your perspectives on this, but it's a female that is in a newer relationship. And she's saying that the guy communicates to her on the weekends, but she would really love like a FaceTime or a call during the week as well. And they both have their own lives. They both have children. So they're busy, right? They're not like just young college kids or anything, but she's worried. She's like, if I ask for him to call me during the week, is that him being inauthentic? Like, is that like making him call me? I don't want him to start being inauthentic if he doesn't want to call me. So she's trying to navigate how can she speak up and share her desires without coming across as needy, or she's also worried about him just like appeasing her, like people pleasing what she wants versus like him actually wanting to call her. So do you guys have thoughts on this?
It's a great question. I mean, the first thing that came to mind is if she needs it and it's something that she wants, like I don't think it's being needy. I think it's just if she wants it now, she'll probably want it in the future. So I would say it's okay to ask for it. Probably want to think about how you ask for it, but ultimately I would say it's okay to ask for it. Yeah,
I don't think like in a relationship you do need to ask for things that you want, and especially within marriage. Like there are things where where I'm like, Frankie, I need this. Like I'm a big physical touch person. That's my number one love language. So like there are times when like I'm not being touched enough, or like for example, our sweet dog who you all can hear like barking and she's getting a little antsy here. Like when we first got her, especially and she was a puppy, Frankie would walk in the door and start giving her attention first before me. And I'd be like, nope. I'd be like,
this is not going to work.
Hell no. You stop touching her. You come over to me. You kiss me first. You touch me first. And I just said that. And he was like, you're right. You know, he's like, I should be giving you attention before the dog, you know? And I set that precedent early on. And now that's like the expectation. And that's what he does. And there's times where I do things where Frankie's like, yeah, that doesn't work for me. Like you're going to have to do something different. And so I think that that's just communication. That's just marriage. It's not inauthentic. I think the whole thing about being in a relationship is it is the best version of personal development you can possibly ever experience. Totally. And so, yeah, like you can think you've made it when you're single and then you get in the relationship and it is going to highlight
so
your
much in
weaknesses.
these last 4 years.
Yeah, like you learn so much about yourself. You learn about your ways of being. You learn about the selfish things that you've always done that like are cool for you, or the ways that you people please, whatever. You learn so much about yourself in a really in a healthy relationship, but in a really beautiful way where both partners are like helping each other grow and helping each other see like, here's what's happening and here's how it's impacting me, or here's how it's impacting your other relationships, or here's how it's impacting your work. And so, yeah, I don't find it like asking him to be inauthentic. I find it to be like, here's me communicating my needs and I'm helping you be a better partner for me. And he just might not know. You know what I mean?
Totally.
Like, how is he supposed to know if you don't tell him?
That's why like I think I know our relationship works so well is because if I ask Janelle like, hey, where do you want to go to dinner tonight? And she doesn't care, she'll say, I don't care. But like other girls I've dated have been like, I don't care. And then I take her to sushi and she's like, well, I actually wanted Mexican food. It's like, then why didn't you say that? So like with Janelle.
Kendall.
Kendall.
Fifth grade.
I couldn't afford sushi back then. I don't know what you're talking about. But I would say, like Janelle just mentioned, that's where resentment is formed. If you are just going about your two separate lives and living your life and not actually expressing what you need, even if it's something as simple as like, I don't want to go to Mexican food, I want to go to sushi, or vice versa, like speak up and say what you need to do. And that goes for dating too, because if she wants that now, it's not going to go away, in my opinion.
Yeah. Right. And if he can't be like receptive to it now, then how is he going to be receptive to feedback when they get married? You know, so it's not being needy. It's like we all have needs. So I think how he responds to that request and just saying, hey, it'd mean a lot to me if we had a couple phone calls throughout the week and if we checked in a little bit more. I know we get a lot of quality time in the weekends, but like, gosh, I just would love to touch base a little bit more throughout the week and explain the why behind it, the heart behind it. It's not like it doesn't need to be militant and methodical of like, we need 3 45-minute FaceTimes during the weeks. It doesn't have to be that. It's like, hey, I care about you so much. I'm really enjoying getting to know you more. Or I don't know if they're like on the I love you level or not or whatever, but like depending on where you're at, just like explain your heart behind it of like, I really enjoy being around you and it brings me so much joy and happiness. And I want a little bit more of that during the week. And I would love if we could touch base a little bit more in the week. And I love when you call me, like it just lights me up. And when you say it like that, it's like helping the other person feel like, okay, I want to do that for her. Like I love making her happy. I love lighting her up. I want her face to light up when I call her,
Yeah, you are amazing. I'm just like witnessing you and all of your just feminine power. You're really, really beautiful, really powerful.
Thank you.
Yeah, I love the script that you give too, because I think sometimes people struggle to put words to their needs or desires. So giving them something like that to follow or to kind of make their own is very helpful. So, okay, I want to get into your love story. Tell me how you guys met. Tell me how you knew that she was the one.
Oh man.
Tell me when you knew you were going to say yes. I want to know all of it.
Janelle loves telling this story, so you should tell it.
Okay.
Go for it.
But I feel like you always
I'll chime in the little details here.
Okay.
In case you couldn't tell, she's a little bit more detailed than I am. So
women typically.
And I'll be like, no, you got that wrong.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, and I'll try to do like the shorter version. Like I'll try to meet in the middle because usually I'm like the 20-minute version of the story and Frankie's like the 1-minute version.
Yeah.
So anyway,
I love
it. Go 10.
Hopefully less. Yeah, hopefully less. So used to live in Colorado. For those who listen to the other podcast, I lived in Colorado. I moved to San Diego. And when I moved here, I changed my career path. I became a personal trainer and I was growing my social media and I was doing fitness stuff, right? So I was a personal trainer at this gym called Fit Athletic Club here in San Diego. I think I didn't even reference it last time, but anyway, there it is. And I got reached out to by a brand called Organifi, and they wanted me to be a brand ambassador for them. And I, at the time, was really big on the Model Health Show with Sean Stevenson, which is like a big like fitness podcast. And he repped Organifi. So I was like, Sean Stevenson has Organifi. Like I want to be a brand ambassador for Organifi. So I go to this Organifi event and I meet a bunch of cool entrepreneurs there. And there was a couple there named Nicholas and Amanda. and they have, I actually can't remember what it's called today.
Mastermind.
Yeah, they have a mastermind, but the name keeps changing, I think. But anyway, it used to be like $1 Billion Body is what it was called at the time. And they were like, we have a men's mastermind. And I was like, well, what the heck's a men's mastermind? I had never heard of that. And they're like, well, we help men. It's like personal and professional development for their career, entrepreneurship, and just well-rounded like health, fitness, faith, wealth, all that good stuff. And I was like, oh, okay, that sounds really awesome. So here's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for a man who is tall, dark, and handsome.
Stop. You put your freaking order in.
Yes.
I put my order into two total strangers at a networking event. And that is the power of specificity and knowing exactly what you're looking for.
Are you about to tell me that this produced that?
Yeah, yes. I am. Yeah, literally. That's why you got to know what you're looking for and you got to know your worth and you got to be confident. That's why I teach freaking confidence. I'm a confidence coach.
You go, girl.
You freaking got to say what you want in life, you know?
Wow.
So I was like, do you have any men that are tall, dark, handsome, in love with Jesus? Because we had talked a little bit about faith at that point. So I was like, faith's really important to me. Entrepreneur and fit like works out a bunch. And they're like, yeah, actually, I think we have a guy that matches that description. And I was like, cool, put me on a date with him. And so I didn't know where he lived. I thought he lived they live in San Diego. I live in San Diego. I just thought we all lived in San Diego, I guess.
Right.
I didn't realize that their whole brand was, obviously online and everything. I was so new to the online space at that time.
Gotcha.
Yeah, worldwide. So they showed me some pictures of him on Instagram and I was like, yeah, cool. Like,
yeah.
Go ahead, hurry up. Let's do the date. And so I remember even like, then, I go and I network with other people. And at the very end, I'm saying goodbye to people and I go up to them again and I'm like, okay, well, don't forget to put me on that date with that guy. And, like, follow up. The fortune is in the follow-up, people, and they're like, yeah, we will. So, and we had exchanged Instagrams. And so I leave and then there had been a little while and I hadn't heard anything. So meanwhile, you can share your part.
So this was what? Probably
I love this. You're like, your turn.
2 months later? A month later? Let's call it a month later. So so I was living in Denver at the time, and then I flew out to San Diego for an in-person mastermind here, and it was downtown Little Italy. We're hanging out, eating dinner, and the wife of the owner of the mastermind was like, "Hey, Frankie, met this girl at this Organifi event. Like, you want me to connect you guys?" And she showed me a picture of Janelle going out on a paddleboard, and I was like, "Absolutely, put me on." It was
kind of like from the back,
It was a Christian bootylicious picture.
It was a little bootylicious, but not super inappropriate.
Yeah, it was okay. It was PG-13. So I was like, yes, put me on a date with her. I want to talk to her. So she tagged me on one of your Instagram on that photo. And then we started talking from there. And then
and I just have to say, so my caption was, who wants to come paddleboarding with me? And then
that was the end.
Then Amanda tags and goes, Frankie Vignone would love it, I'm sure.
Yes, I forgot about that.
He writes and he goes, next time I'm on the left coast.
I was trying to be so cool.
I was like, bro, what?
You said the left coast.
Left coast. And a hang loose emoji.
Oh, no.
Hey, come on, guys.
That's pretty bad.
I know.
She didn't say no, though.
I know. And so then I was like, wait, where does this freaking fool live? I'm like, this sucks. I'm like, I thought he lived in San Diego. So I go and I look.
Clearly not.
He lives in Denver. And I had just moved from Colorado. And I'm like, oh boy, this is never going to work because, he lives in Colorado. I'm never moving back to Colorado. I can't stand that place. No offense. I love Colorado. Not really. But, I didn't want to live there ever again.
She doesn't love it.
I don't love it. I love living by the ocean and I don't like being landlocked. So anyway, I actually slid into Frankie's DMs.
Oh.
Yeah.
After that comment.
Yeah. Okay. I think we commented maybe a little bit back and forth or something. We both followed each other. And then I DM'd him and I was like, I don't even know what I first said to you. I think I was just like, hey, like, let me know when you're ever in San Diego and we can go paddleboarding or something chill. I don't know, chill vibes. Yeah. And he responded. And so from there we become like Instagram friends. Mm-hmm. And so we're following each other on Instagram and like he would respond to my Instagram story and I'd be showing like workout stuff and fitness stuff. And he'd be like, cool move and stuff like that.
Stop.
That was your comment?
All right, you have to give some more backstory.
Okay, I'm like a nerd.
Because we both were dating other people kind of lightly. Like, I know you weren't official, but I was kind of a little more official. So I wasn't trying to cross the line.
That makes more sense.
And I also wasn't like trying to flirt with her. I was just like, she had an online fitness business. I had an online fitness business at the time. Right. So like that was the connection there. And yes, the comments could have been a little bit better. Maybe I
Sorry, we're not here to shame
This emoji. No, it's fine.
Beat up session on Frankie.
Yeah, totally.
But-
He's like, I thought we were getting an interview. I was just bullied the whole time.
I am going to therapy because Emily and Janelle.
No, that makes so much sense. You're
Thank
being
you.
cordial and,
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Anyway.
Yeah, and we both didn't know that the other person was dating anyone because we both weren't putting them on our Instagram feed. So that's always a really great red flag is if you're dating someone who uses social media and posts on social media, but isn't willing to post to you, that usually means they're not that into you. So every friend of mine who's ever had that and they like won't listen
If you're
to me,
wondering, that's a clear
I'm
sign.
always like, no, if he has posted about him and his friends going skiing together, but he hasn't posted about you and him going to Napa together, that means he's hiding you from something. And they don't listen to me. And then I end up being right. And I'm sorry, but I'm always right. If he won't put you on his freaking Instagram and he uses, I know some guys don't use it. So if he doesn't use it, that's different. But
quick question about that.
Yeah.
Since we're on the topic, what do you feel about people who have had their online business for a very long time and they're dating someone new and they care about them, but it's just like feels too early to introduce them to a 10-year relationship of their online business?
That's fair.
You know what I mean?
I
think that varies.
That's a good point.
Depending on who it is, because like, clearly talking about myself, but like, who is this? Asking for a friend. But it's like, I've had this platform for 10 years and like introducing somebody to this audience of a 10-year audience, like it's a big deal to me.
Yeah.
So it's something that I'm not just going to go on a, third, fourth date with somebody and post them on to my audience. That seems like, it's like, does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
Fair.
So I think it kind of varies depending on
That's
where
a good
you're
point.
at.
Yeah, but both of us have been dating our people for like 5 or 6 months.
Okay.
So if you're with
that
someone,
still might be, I don't know.
But if you really like someone,
but there's also like different. Like if you have a platform and you're not normally showing personal relationships, then there's also exceptions to that too.
Yeah.
To an extent. But I still like, if you were to be telling me that you've been dating a guy for 6 months and you guys see each other every week, let's say, or even 2 or 3 times a week, and it's been 6 months and you still don't want to show your audience him, but you're resistant, like you can't commit to like showing him to people, like
Totally.
that to me would still be a red flag.
I think you're right.
Because like you must not like him that much.
Or there must be something that's like holding you back, something that's like deep rooted that maybe it's not meant for you. And that's why you're not wanting to share it.
Yeah.
That's more of like a look in the mirror kind of situation.
That's good.
Yeah. So 3 or 4 dates, that's different.
That's a good point though.
But I'm saying if you're boyfriend, girlfriend, you are committed to each other, you've been official, you've met each other's families, like things like that. And you're in an official relationship and it's been at least, 5, 6, 7 months. To me at that point, they should be public knowledge.
Yeah. Okay.
Great point.
Glad we're I love having open conversation like that because it gets you like thinking.
Because it's not always black and white.
It's not black and white, no.
That's I guess the challenge of dating in general. Is like, well, if I just do these things, then it will work out. Well, it's like it always doesn't.
It always doesn't until it does.
Yeah. It's not always black and white. It's so true. Yeah.
Okay, so back to your love story.
Our love story. Where were we?
So
we were talking about DMing, how poorly written my comments were.
And then I would respond to his like cool move, and I'd be like,
I did not say that.
Dude, I am going to go scroll
We need to like
back.
screenshot and go
I
look
have
at these.
screenshots. I do. I've gone back because I think it's hilarious now. And then I would respond and try to be like, yeah, thanks. Like, what are some of your favorite moves?
Stop.
And I would try to like,
just as bad.
Thank you.
That's just as bad.
Now I'm being bullied. Mom, I need a therapy session.
You got an emotional support dog.
We needed to go like 2 seconds longer to laugh at both of you, and now we got it, and now it makes sense why you're together.
We're
both nerds. Yay.
Oh, you guys are great. Okay. Keep going.
And so, so then I would like try to start a conversation because I'm like trying to like get to know this person. And then he would leave me on red.
This is getting worse before it gets better.
It is. It really is. So I was like, okay. I kept being like, I guess he might not be that into me, which obviously I'm like a very competitive person. So I'm like, I will change that and he will like me. No. So anyway, that kind of continued on for about 6 or 7 months. But we were kind of friends, like a few interactions that we'd had.
Have like business
from
calls.
afar. Yeah. I scheduled a business event on his Calendly link. So we could talk about online business. And so I remember we did that, and we talked for like an hour and a half or something, and we didn't talk about business that much. But again, he was still like dating that person. I was still kind of lightly dating this guy that I was trying to like leave and all this stuff. Anyway, then I remember one time I posted a sermon on my Instagram story, and Frankie responded to the sermon and was like, "Great sermon. Thanks for sharing."
Keeps getting worse.
And I was like, "Oh, did you actually listen to it?" And he was like, "Yeah, I did." And it was about fasting. And we both shared how like we hadn't really done many like spiritual fasts. Like we obviously had done intermittent fasting and like, fitness fasting, but we hadn't done any spiritual fasts. So then we actually decided to do a spiritual fast together for 24 hours. And so we set like a date and time. And then I remember we were supposed to have a phone call to talk about it afterwards. And then you kind of ghosted me on that phone call.
So terrible.
There was that.
I don't know how you put up with
it was kind of like a big murky, you just didn't really know for a little while. But then I remember he went to Tony Robbins. When did you go to Tony Robbins?
July, like the July before we hung out.
Yeah. So it was like July 2018. And I remember a specific shift in him, which partially was probably Tony Robbins and partially was because like you were more newly single, although you were doing your 1 year.
So I was going to bring up, when you asked a question about what are some things that mentors said for you to like get out of a relationship, that was what I was going to bring up, that topic of me going to the Tony Robbins event and saying like not to settle, because I was always settling in these relationships leading up to Janelle. And then I went to the Tony Robbins event and I just felt like, I mean, if you've ever been to one, you just feel like you could run through a wall, walk on coals, do all these things. And then I just was thinking, I'm like, I would never settle in any other area of my life, like business, health, friend relationships. Like you feel that way. And then I'm like, why am I settling in my other personal relationships? So that is a shift. And that's what I was going to bring up when you asked that question earlier.
That's huge. And how does it feel to know that you're the result of someone not settling?
Ooh, I guess I never really thought of it like that. But yeah, I mean, we both like knew we were a catch. Like, I think that's what's so cool about our relationship is it's never been like, I think there were times probably in other relationships, one, we both dated people that we've tried to change a lot. And two, like we've always been the ones maybe like within our relationships where, I was the stronger faith person. I was the one doing personal development and going to, like Tony Robbins type of conferences and just growing, and living my, pursuing and living my best life. And then I would date people who weren't really doing that stuff and I would try to bring them along the journey. And then Frankie would do the same thing. Like he would date people and he was the one who was like pursuing the best life and like growing. And like, we just dated people who were like, kind of resistant to it or just not into it.
Like not doing it for themselves.
Right. Yeah. Like if they did ever do it, it was for us. And like, I remember, there was times where I'd bring like boyfriends to stuff and I would just feel awkward the whole time because I'm like, oh gosh, like I know he hates this, but at least he's doing it for me, know? So then to like meet someone and for us to both feel so like, I guess to use a Christian-y word, but like equally yoked and to feel like we're both like on fire for life. We're both crushing it in our careers. We're both like growing. We're both working out. Like we're both healthy. We both just, we don't want to drink a bunch. Like I think we just had like so much respect for each other and so much honor for each other and so much like inspiration from each other. And we both motivate each other and we both have always been able to see each other as like equals. And so there's like safety in feeling like you're with someone who you're equal to instead of feeling like you have to change someone.
Wow. Yep. That's beautiful. And it goes back to what you were saying at the beginning, how when you love and respect yourself and you're holding yourself to the standard of health and wellness and mental well-being, emotional well-being, finances, like in every aspect of life, it makes sense that you turn and look and see someone running that same race essentially. Right. So, okay, when did it turn from this like awkward Instagram exchange at times into like a romance? When did it become romantic?
The first time we met in real life was I was going home to Colorado and I was hosting a birthday party for myself at New Belgium Brewery.
I love you.
Yep. I know.
Totally did.
I'm so that person.
I do the same thing, by the way.
Yeah. I'm like, well,
celebrate
I don't need
yourself.
anyone else to do it. I'll host it.
Yeah.
So I remember my friend Catherine was flying home with me that weekend for the birthday party and we were at the airport in San Diego. And I remember I had a beer. So I had a little bit of liquid courage and I was like, I think I'm going to invite my Instagram crush to my birthday party. And she was like, yeah, do it. I'm like, okay, I'm DMing him now. And so like Frankie was like, everyone knew he was like my Instagram crush, that I had never met. And so I DM'd him and I was like, hey, like my birthday party's on Saturday at New Belgium if you want to swing by kind of thing. And he lives in Denver, which is like, or at the time he lived in Denver and it's like an hour and a half away from Fort Collins. Oh. So it's not really that close.
It's not a swing by thing.
No, it's really not. No. And so he responded and was like, hey, like, are you going to be in Denver at all? And I was like, no, I'm not. So, like if you want to see me, my birthday party, Fort Collins, Saturday, like that's going to be
there or
be there or don't
really
but
care.
Here I am, you know, these are your options.
Yeah.
And so he ended up coming with a friend and we were like definitely kind of flirty. I remember I used a big word or something. What did you say? Do you remember this?
Oh, this is so bad. I was like, that's a big word for a fitness influencer. Yeah.
You did not.
Yeah.
But she was being pretty aggressive to me too.
I was being very
gotcha.
feisty. It was like a
Okay.
feisty, like we
I could see
still
that.
to this
Yeah.
day are a little like feisty flirty. So
Yeah. Okay.
we were both
Yeah.
shots fired a little bit. So yeah, that happened. And then we still were kind of in those other relationships even when that happened. But I remember that was the day that I was like, okay, I really like Frankie, even if nothing ever happens with him. I'm not going to keep settling. So that was kind of the moment for me. And so I ended things officially for the last time. I had ended things with him so many times. I ended things with him for the last time, literally like the day after my birthday party.
Wow.
Yeah. And then that was like done. And then anyway, so then like
fast forward
for like
to-
3 months, nothing's happening. We still are barely DMing, barely whatever, not. We separately are leaving our people. He's beginning his, his time of no dating for 1 year, like all separate things. And then he is coming to California for a business trip because he ended up taking a new job with a tech company.
Yeah.
And so they were sending him to San Diego for like a business trip. And so he DM'd me and said, hey, I'm gonna be in San Diego. You want to grab a workout? And I was like, yeah, let's grab a workout. Sure. And so we grabbed a workout in Ocean Beach in the grassy area there. And I was like, I'll show you how bands work. I'm about to freaking kick your butt with bands.
did.
And I remember you're like, bands
Like, I didn't know these
can't make my
muscles
butt.
were in your butt.
Right. I was like, let me show you.
That's awesome.
And then we're like playing in the ocean and I was like reenacting something of like a wedding that I was at. And I was like, yeah, it was like this. And I like grabbed his face and like pretended like I was going in for a kiss just to like reenact the wedding. But then I didn't kiss him, obviously. So I kind of was like planting seeds of like, you could kiss me if you ever so wanted to, and then share what you always share about the Cali burrito part.
The Cali burrito. I love burritos.
I
Yeah.
love burritos.
So Mike's Taco Club in Ocean Beach. If you've never been, you gotta go.
I don't, and
It's
I live right
so
there.
Good.
Dude,
It's so good.
They're Cali burritos.
So it's right at the very end of like the main part of Ocean Beach, and it's like overlooking the ocean. And I remember we got done with the workout, the endorphins are flying, sat down, had the burrito, and then Janelle was here, the ocean was behind her, and the sun was shining, the reggae music was playing.
Oh, man.
And I'm like, this girl should not just be my friend anymore. And like that was the moment. And then everything after that, I was like, completely changed from corny business professional jokes to like I'm going past the next line. So that was my moment.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
What a great moment.
It was.
And so we continued it basically like I had a couple client meetings and he had a couple meetings. And so we dispersed and then we were like, let's hang out again tonight. So he came by my place downtown and picked me up at like 4. And then we were like birding all around San Diego together. And then he had actually already made plans to hang out with a friend that night, but he didn't tell me that. So then he was like, oh, by the way, my friend Chase and I are hanging out tonight. Like, you want to join? And I was like, sure, like, let's do it. And I think that's like a moment where like you could choose to be offended and be like, oh my gosh, like he's not pursuing me properly. Or you could be like, okay, this is so cool. I get to be like along for his, like the ride. And I like get to meet some of his friends and like learn more about him. And so, yeah, we went and hung out with Chase. And I remember our knees started to touch a little bit underneath like the table. And it was like
pretty serious.
Our knees are touching. What's happening? And then I remember I went to the bathroom and Chase said, dude, she's into you. And then like Chase says that the story was that Frankie was like, oh, really, man? Or something like that. But you were like, your side of the story is that you obviously knew.
Yeah,
so.
Obviously.
Nice try, Chase.
You got to play it cool.
Nice try, Chase.
Yeah.
Like, oh, you think?
You think?
Really?
So basically, long story long is that
long story
very long. Always, we ended up like kissing that night for actually literally like 4 hours making out because we were literally that into each other. Aww. And the whole time like, this is crazy. You're my Instagram crush. Why are we making out right now? This is so weird.
She would literally say that.
Like, literally
yes.
In your head?
No, out loud.
Out loud. I am literally no mystery. Like, no mystery. Here I am.
You don't have to guess with Janelle.
That's amazing.
And you'd be like, yeah, it's fine. Like, we're this is cool. And then my whole time back of my head, I'm like, is he just like making out with me because he just wants to like make out with a hot girl in San Diego.
Right.
But I was like, what's going to happen tomorrow? So, and I say making out because I always feel like this is kind of a crazy thing to people, but we did not have sex till we were married.
No way.
Yep. We waited to have sex. So we were not actually having sex. We were literally making out.
Wow.
Yep. And then we did sleep together, which I was like really against ever spending the night with guys, especially like on the first
just
date.
Sleep, not
we were just sleeping next to each other, but I was against that, you know, especially on the first date. I was like, I had a very strict rule. Like you don't sleep next to a guy, even on a first date. But I broke my rule for Frankie on that one, which I'm not saying that's great because it definitely could lead to temptation. But we woke up the next morning and I was like kind of thinking like, are we going to keep kissing in the morning or is this kind of like a night thing? You know what I mean? And then we woke up the next morning and we like didn't even brush our teeth, which is so gross. And we just started making out again for like another 30 minutes.
And scene.
At
And
like
then we fell in love forever.
Frankie's like, I'm officially uncomfortable. Somebody move the conversation
People
on.
need to know the details. I'm sorry, but people live for the details.
I love it.
You're too great.
So yeah, after that, like the next morning he flew out and he was like, so are you moving to are you moving to Colorado or am I moving to San Diego? So it was basically at the end of that date, we knew we were going to be together.
I mean, that was like your first real date, like that day. And after that, you guys just knew.
Then I asked her to be my girlfriend 2 weeks later, right? Or a week maybe.
Did you do it?
No, dude. It was
safety.
I did it with the hang loose sign. I brought her one rose and some Walmart chocolates. She said yes.
And she said yes. No, it was like 3 days later.
Yeah.
3 days later. Yep. We became boyfriend, girlfriend. And then we were looking at rings 10 weeks later.
It went quick.
Yeah.
Wow. That's honestly amazing. But that's what they say when you know, and it sounds
Yeah.
like you guys just knew.
did.
You were on the same level, equally yoked, running the same race, so to speak. That's incredible. Okay, I want to get a few questions in before we end because we're going to have to end soon. There was a really good question asking, how do you honor your union without losing yourself?
Wow. Beautiful.
And another question that's very similar, how do they balance autonomy and togetherness? So kind of the same thing. So how do you balance that?
That's a great question. So I'm really into right now. My big thing is I'm training for a half Ironman.
Oh my goodness.
So it takes up a lot of time. So Janelle knows I need that time to train. And for me, like working out is a hobby. So like, I'm not like going and like golfing on top of that and like, you know, drinking with the boys for like a whole night. So like she gives me that space to go and work out and train, which, you know, might require 4 or 5 hours on Saturday. But then when we're together, you know, like I'm not, for the most part, I do my best to not be on my phone, to like be with her, not like, you know, have all these distractions. And we also are very intentional with our date nights. So we date every single week. We always go on an intentional date night together. So it's a mix of she gives me the time so that I can pursue my hobbies and vice versa. And then when we're together, we're together.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah, I think for me, like I love journaling so much. And so for me, that's like a time where I get to know myself more. So every morning with my morning routine, journaling is a really big part of it. And for anyone who wants to be more a part of journaling, you can check out, I have a free masterclass. So I can like link that here, but it's, you know, the top 3 reasons why you're not confident yet. And there's journaling baked in within that. But I just think journaling is a way to like really get to know yourself more. And so that's just one thing. I mean, I have hobbies too. I obviously work out as well. And we both have friends outside of each other that we go hang out with. It is like kind of I think every couple's different. So you have to kind of find what works well for you. But I think the more you know yourself and the more you're able to communicate your needs, the easier it is to have both. And then a lot of couples I know don't do a weekly date night. So if possible, even if you can't maybe afford a super nice dinner every single week or something like that, or maybe you have kids, like it might look different for different stages of life and different financial places and things like that. But just making like, even if it's 1 hour and you might not feel like it, like that's something we've come to realize about date night. It can be sometimes a little bit like the gym where you don't always feel like doing date night. Like it might sound better because we're exhausted and tired to sit on the couch and watch an episode or something and chill.
I feel like that would totally be me.
Yeah. And that's good. We like doing that too, but we're like, it can be
get
really,
out of your normal routine.
You got to get out of your normal. And every time we go, we end up having these really, we'll leave a lot of times we'll leave our phones in the car or we'll leave our phone just like away where we don't see it the whole time. And we're like, okay, like, let's talk. And at first, sometimes there's like you're like, there's nothing to talk about because we've been together so long. Right. But then you sit there and then all of a sudden you remember something that you hadn't shared yet. And then you're like, oh yeah, earlier this week this happened. And then you just fall more in love with each other again. So yeah.
That's a great answer. Do you need to resolve all arguments and issues, or is it okay to just sometimes ignore them? That's a question.
I would say no, you should always solve the issues. I don't think it's okay to ignore them. I think it's important to know how the other person likes to resolve conflict. But like Janelle and I like to solve stuff ASAP, like as soon as possible. Like if something comes up, like we want to just get to it and fix it right away. But let's say, for example, maybe I'm somebody that needs more time. If an argument pops up and Janelle still might be that person that wants to solve it right away, like you should have that conversation with your partner or spouse and say, how do you like to resolve conflict? Do you like to resolve it very quickly, or do you need time and space to come back to it? But I think conflict should never be just brushed under the rug. Maybe how you resolve it needs to be talked about, and know what your other person, like, how do they like to resolve things?
Yeah. And the relationship expert that taught us that actually recently, she was saying that like the person who needs more space needs to be the person who brings it back up. So let's say like in that example, like he's the one who needs more space. Like he needs 24 or 48 hours to think about the conflict before he's ready to like dive into a conversation about it. And I'm like chomping at the bits to do it right away in this example. Then I get to give him the space and be like, okay, like you get some time and like, let me know when you're ready. And then it's up to him, because it's easy for that person to never bring it back up. But it's really important that the person who needs more space needs to be the person to bring it back up and be like, okay, I'm ready to talk about it now. Yeah. And then they've had time to process it. And so both sides need to respect each other if it's different. Frankie and I, apparently the relationship expert said like what we have is very rare because we both are on the same page. So we both want to talk about it and get it over with right away. So we don't have any like 2-day rules or 3-day. It's like people are like, we just do it right in front of people, even sometimes not in a weird way. Like we're not like huge fights or something, but like
people do get uncomfortable.
People sometimes get uncomfortable around us because we just like deal with our conflict in the moment, like while it's happening. Yeah. But like then it's done, and then we're like back in love like 5 minutes later. So I don't know. That's how it works for us.
I love that. People talk about love languages often, and I think what I'm hearing is you guys are mentioning there's also like a conflict language that people can learn about each other and also themselves. And it's great. It's like with love languages, right? If you have the exact same love language, it's so easy because you just love the way that you love to be loved. Yeah. But when you have like opposite love languages, it does take more communication, more effort, more just space to understand each other and agreements on what that looks like. Yeah. So I think that's very helpful. And then I guess one last question before we end here. I think this one was meant for, they may have thought I was interviewing an older couple, but I'm curious on what y'all's thoughts are on this anyways. The question was, how do you deal with aging bodies together? So obviously you guys are very young, you're beautiful and you're fit, but like when you think about aging together as a couple, what comes up for you?
So Janelle, and I'm not speaking this over her anymore, it's going to be gone. She's had some back issues recently. So that's changed the way that she can work out, and she's had to adapt and grow. And in my perfect world, like, you know, before Janelle even went down even a year of being married, it was like, oh, my wife and I are going to go skiing, we're going to go hiking, we're going to go do all these crazy adventures together and like go get after it. And, you know, Janelle's idea of fun is a little bit different than that. But let's say it was the same thing and she had this back injury. Like we just have communicated on how does she need to move, work out versus me. And just like, again, giving each other that space and coming back to the things we've been talking about this whole time, being intentional and then communicating each other's needs. So I don't know if that answers the question, but that was the example that came to mind.
Yeah, that's great. And I think it's a real issue that a lot of people deal with, whether it's health issues or actually like body mechanics or like even the visual experience of getting older, which I think we'll know when we all age and figure that out as we walk it out. But yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. A thing that just came up is like your words have power, right? Where it's like, I try every single day to speak life into Janelle and to tell her how beautiful she is to me, like how much she means to me, how proud I am of her endeavors, whether it's work or some fitness adventure or whatever she's doing. Like I try and be very intentional of that versus like in the past, I've had other relationships where I'm like, oh man, like this, I wish this person would change this, or like, I wish she was more athletic, or I wish XYZ. I don't think that about Janelle at all. I'm only thinking about like, how can I speak life into her? And I don't just think it, but I say it to her. And like, when I say it, she lights up and she responds. And I mean, you can share your opposite end of the experience on how that feels for you. But I think that's really important because so many times we just walk around and like have our own idea of like what perfection looks like, but you can be grateful for the good you have in your relationship today.
Yeah, that's so good.
Yeah, I think it's the same as like if you are seeing things when you look in the mirror and you're like not loving that you're seeing stretch marks or fat in your low belly or whatever, like wrinkles on your face, like there are signs of aging or signs of imperfection. And I think if you're really hard on yourself when you look in the mirror, you're more likely to be hard on other people. So I would say like for this person specifically and anyone else who's like thinking along these lines, how do you speak to yourself when you look in the mirror? And that's going to start to impact how you look at other people. And if you're really harsh and critical of yourself, a lot of times you're going to look for all the little imperfections on other people. Like I can use a skin example for me. Like I've been on like a skin journey. And it's interesting how like if I'm looking at my skin in the mirror and I'm like, oh my gosh, look at all those pimples, look at all those blackheads, look at all that blah, the bumps, blah, blah, blah. I mean, I hate admitting out loud, but then I'm like that to other people, like where I'm looking more carefully at their skin. But then now the kinder I've been to my skin and the kinder I've been to like looking at the mirror and being like, wow, your skin is beautiful, glowing. Like I feel like I'm looking at other people and I'm seeing that same beauty in them and nothing's really changed other than the inner dialogue. And so I think that, you know, even if you're aging, even if your things are changing, how are you speaking to yourself? Because you can still choose to speak to yourself with love and kindness. And then that's going to become easier to do to your significant other as well.
That's really beautiful. And I think it's so true. It just goes back to everything that we're saying, like you attract what you are and you see what you are. So how you treat yourself is going to be reflected in all the relationships around you as well. One last question. When people think about y'all's love story, what do you hope they feel or how do you hope that they are impacted?
One of our major goals is we want to represent God through our marriage. And that means just sharing joy and love and happiness through our marriage and how we interact with each other, how we honor each other, and then how as a couple, you know, interact and honor other people.
Yeah. I think like obviously everything that Frankie is saying. And then my other thought alongside of that is don't settle. Like be willing to walk away from good for great. Because when I left this 6-year relationship and even some of those other ones, like I didn't know that Frankie was on the other side of it. I kept praying and hoping and believing. And I was writing letters to my future husband and I was praying for my future husband. I was doing all these things, but I didn't really know, you know, there was a lot of like faith that went into that and just believing that God has the absolute best in store for you. And he really has plans to prosper you. He's not trying to match you with someone that you're really not that happy with or that you feel like you're settling with. Like he wants to give you the desires of your heart, period. So stop. Like, I know I spent so long being like, well, he probably wants me to be with someone who like is kind of like this or kind of like that. And I thought like God almost like wanted to like sting me or something, like almost like pull me down within my marriage or like not, punish me and like not give me the best. And I should just be happy with what I've got, you know? And it's like, that's not how God works. Like he is love and he has the best of the best of the best in store for you. It doesn't mean it's perfect. Of course, there's going to be conflict and whatnot. But if you feel that lack of peace in your body in any area of your life, whether that is your relationship, a career, anything, like pay attention to that lack of peace and like ask what God's best is for you.
And that goes back to being one of those really good guiding questions of just a question that you can really ask yourself in a moment where you're alone, you're tuning in to your inner truth. And when you ask that question, you get really honest with yourself. It becomes really clear what decisions you need to make. So you guys, thank you both so much for sharing so openly on your love story, on what you've learned through love and relationship. I think that the audience and everyone is going to be greatly impacted by a healthy example of what love can look like. And more than anything, like what I'm really just sitting with right now is just do not settle. And I know it sounds really simple, but when you've been single a long time, when it's a big desire of your heart, it can get easy to start maybe like dwindling down what you want. Like, well, maybe I'm thinking too big. Maybe I'm thinking too much. So having an example of the healthy love and the people that are just so like you just hit each other's list like crazy, it's very encouraging. So I know I speak on behalf of a lot of the audience as well. Thank you guys. Appreciate you both.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us. This is a blast as always.
Good. I'm so glad. And I'll probably have you guys on again, I'm sure, at some point. You listeners, thank you so much for listening to today's episode. If you enjoyed today's show, please do us a favor and text it to a friend that you think needs to hear this episode. You can also share it on your Instagram stories, and you can definitely tag myself and Janelle and she'll share it with Frankie. I don't know if Frankie's going to be on there, but
we'll see.
I'll have any links to contact them down below. So whether it's Frankie's podcast, both of their podcasts, their Instagrams, whatever, I'll get it from them. I'll link it down below so you guys can check them out there. Feel free to tag them in your stories as well. That's it, guys. I'll see you in the next episode of Evolve with Emily. Bye, everyone.